Hello, it's Mike Levin on March 21st, 2015, out walking the big guy, getting ready to go down the path here in Isham Park. Welcome to spring in New York City. So yesterday was one of my last Code with Mike Fridays, and I got the Pipulate demo, sort of like a PowerPoint deck, but in Google Slides, to a point I'm satisfied with, and I embedded the link in the Pipulate user interface, so it'll come up whenever anyone's trying it from either Levinix or Pipulate.com or a fresh pull from GitHub. And my next step is probably to make sure Levinix runs solidly, Pipulate runs solidly on Levinix, which it will on the first build after an install. But the daemons don't get installed, so things like the scheduling aren't running. But I don't expect many people are going to be using the scheduling part of Pipulate from Levinix. It just doesn't seem to make sense, because you'd have to leave it running on your desktop all the time as this little virtual machine that you maybe minimize, and things will go wrong. So Pipulate on the desktop via Levinix, a Pipulate server on the desktop via Levinix, is mostly for people who are just kicking the tires of what it might be like to own and run their own server. It's like, well, what if you had what was happening here, but 10 times faster and running from a tiny little box that was hanging off from the back of your home Wi-Fi router. That's what we're really discussing here. I'm very happy with one of the slides towards the end, which is the one that YouTube happened to choose as the thumbnail for the video, where I talk about the 4 steps to, from just being introduced to Pipulate to whatever, world domination, building an empire, basically having enough command of hardware and software so that you can build things to scale, along the lines of a Google or a Facebook or an Amazon or whatever. And the first step is just, spreadsheets using Pipulate. Introduce yourself to a little Python code. The second step is using a virtual machine on your desktop. First dose free sort of stuff. And then the next step is moving to real hardware, albeit tiny hardware. I will advocate things like ARM microservers that you can turn a Raspberry Pi into, or there's lots of other approaches. There's even like Blade ARM servers. I believe the Baidu search engine in China is ARM based, but at any rate, tiny, cheap, low power, cool running hardware that you control personally yourself. And then the next step after that is the cloud, because no matter what, other companies are going to be able to deploy 1,000 of these things in 10 different places around the world, faster, easier than you ever could. So you need to learn how to lean on other companies' infrastructures. And I get people used to that concept early in the whole affair by leaning on the, or I should say controversially so, leaning on the Google GData API, which is how you actually manipulate data in Google Docs and all, mostly Google Docs. I was going to say all the other services, but there's only a few services that expose that. I believe calendars, maybe blogs. GData hooked to a bunch of different early Google services, but then as Google's number of service offerings exploded, I believe the scope of GData was insufficient to address everything, so they created a unified Google API, which is the one most developers are used to, with a dashboard and the little mobile-like toggles where you can flip things on and off that you're using. It's also where you pay for the, have to pay Google services. And GData is not deprecated, whatever the word is, yet. It's going to be kept running, but it is not part of the unified Google API. So, second warning on leaning on the Google infrastructure. The first is that it's better not to have dependencies than to have dependencies, so get rid of them if you can. So why use one like Google itself? The second warning is the one that you're using from Google is not part of its frontline offerings. Yet, there is so much advantage in this approach, which will only really be visible to people who actually jump on the bandwagon and maybe start using Pipulate. Get one document set up to track the one metric that you care about most. You know, maybe for some people it'll be YouTube subscribers, for others it'll be Twitter followers. Set it to update daily, and then, you know, forget about it. Every time you open that spreadsheet, it'll just have your running tally of how many followers or subscribers you had on each day, and that will make the lights go off why to lean on the Google infrastructure today. It's just so practical, convenient, pragmatic, collaborative, and all the rest of this. It's the environment where you want to do interactive investigations because it's got all the resources of Google behind making a good spreadsheet user interface that can collaborate with users around the world, tie in with other Google services, and be competitive enough with the Microsoft Office suite that it always has a decent UI and availability and stability, features. So, very, very worth doing today. Probably not so much in the future, but that's part of my job now, to keep an eye open for what Pipulate 2.0 will become one day, so that it preserves all the knowledge and know-how, and even the Google spreadsheets that we've used with Pipulate in the past. It should be easy to maintain reverse compatibility, because anything in the future can just pull those things over as files and essentially peel off their own copy of everything that was being stored data-wise in Google spreadsheets. So these are my thoughts. Let's see, I went tangentially off onto leaning on the Google data structure or infrastructure pretty quickly. What was I discussing before that? Oh yeah, walking through the Pipulate things, the 4 steps of, you know, with the cloud being the last and most optional step of the entire equation. But basically, the Pipulate bandwagon I'm inviting people to jump onto is not one of just free and open source SEO and social media and influencer software. It is the first step of a education intended to load you up with the exact right abilities of the sort that you need for the Peter Drucker style knowledge worker information economy that we're going into, where the real, you know, guru kung fu samurai warriors who can do anything in tomorrow's world are the ones who start acquiring and becoming comfortable with these skills today, with an emphasis on things that you would call core, and with a deliberate attempt to filter out those things you would call user interface or platform bound APIs. So this is why I'm not focusing on mobile development, native app development, but rather focusing on a client-server approach where generic Unix/Linux boxes are the servers running Python, interacting with web browsers running JavaScript as the client. And that's pretty much what I'm preaching. And so come on, jump on the bandwagon. Thanks for joining me. Hope to talk to you soon. And don't forget to subscribe on this snowy March 21st in New York City.